Good evening, everyone. My name is Edgar, and you're watching Historical Conspiracies. Tonight, Kardia will be reading a report on the STENDEC Mystery. So without further ado, let's jump right in.
The STENDEC Mystery, also known as the BSAA Stardust Accident. BSAA is actually the British South American Airways. August 2nd of 1947, a flight from Buenos Aires to Santiago, Chile, vanished. It's good to look into the background of the actual crew and passengers of this flight to get a little bit more information. Stardust, which was the name of the plane, carried 6 passengers and 5 crew members. The passengers were Cassis Said Atala, who was a Palestinian returning home to see his dying mother, Jack Gooderham and Harold Pach, they were both businessmen, Peter Young, who was an agent for some kind of an agency in Dunlop, Paul Simpson, a British civil servant, Marta Limpert, who was a resident of German origin who had been stranded in Germany during the war along with her husband. One of the passengers, Atala, who we just discussed, had supposedly sewn a diamond into the lining of his suit. Meanwhile, the other passenger, Limpert, was bringing her dead husband's ashes back with her. But Simpson, the other passenger, is curious because he was functioning as a king's messenger. He had diplomatic papers that were supposed to go to the British embassy in Santiago. From what we do know about the flight's disappearance, that on August 2nd around 1:45 p.m., the radio operator, Harmer, sent a message out in Morse code to the airport in Santiago, the pending expected arrival of this flight, which was supposed to happen at 5:45 p.m. The flight never made it to that destination. It disappeared. There was an unsuccessful 5-day search for any remains of either the flight, crew members, any sightings of the actual airplane flying to its destination. It was discovered that an amateur radio operator heard a faint SOS signal from Stardust, which raised the possibility that they're able to find this flight and hopefully maybe find some survivors, but that was not the case. The flight was found, but it was found 50 years later, in 98. Some people climbing up Mount Tupungado ended up finding the remains, the wreckage of the aircraft engine, along with some pieces of shreds and clothing. 2 years later, additional wreckage was found, and they ended up actually finding some human remains that they did DNA on. According to people who looked into the remains of this flight, they realized that it was traveling at near cruising speed at the time of impact, and there was no signs at all that there was any kind of emergency attempt at landing. Through the investigation, it was found that they probably mistaked their ground speed to be faster than it actually was, and the crew probably figured out that they safely had crossed the Andes mountain range and decided they were going to start doing their descent into Santiago. Through some protests, in 2000, the Argentine Air Force decided that the Captain Cook, was not at fault. It was most likely a heavy snowstorm or abrupt change in weather that ended up causing the crash. Here's where things get a little interesting. The STENDEC message. The last Morse code message sent by the Stardust ended up being ETA, Santiago, 1745 hours, STENDEC, STENDEC. Even though the operator from the Santiago airport said that the transmission was loud and clear, he could not understand the last word and asked for the pilot to repeat the last word, being STENDEC. The pilot repeated the word twice. Because of the word, people have led to many conclusions, including before the aircraft was found, that there was some kind of a UFO encounter, and that's where the plane had gone. The UFO had taken the plane or taken the passengers. Other theories that were proposed was that STENDEC was actually the pilot suffering from hypoxia. Now, for those of you who don't know, hypoxia is actually where your body is somehow deprived of adequate oxygen. Now, generalized hypoxia happens in perfectly healthy people when they ascend to high altitude, where this pilot was obviously on a high altitude. He was crossing the mountain range. Severe hypoxia can cause confusion, disorientation, hallucinations, behavioral changes, as well as a whole bunch of other things. And that's why people think that maybe this pilot was suffering from hypoxia. According to the hypoxia theory, the pilot didn't say ETA Santiago 1745 hours STENDEC. He meant to say descent, which is an anagram for STENDEC. Yet another definition of STENDEC came because some World War II pilots used the obscure abbreviation to signify severe turbulence encountered, now descending emergency crash landing. This would obviously make more sense if the rest of the message was an estimated time of arrival to San Diego at 5:45. The rest of it wouldn't make sense if it was severe turbulence encountered, and now we're doing a crash landing. What is your opinion about this case? What do you think the message stood for? Was it descent and he just had hypoxia? Was it something else? Do you have your own theory? Doing the research that I did for the disappearance of this flight, I have found so many other airliner disappearances and things of that nature. So if you guys want to see more of these, let me know in the comments below. One last thing I wanted to add was that the DNA results did come back and a bunch of the victims were identified. 5 out of the 8 British victims have actually been identified.
Alright guys, I hope you learned a lot. I sure did. If you have anything you'd like to add, please put them in the comments. And as always, please check out our sponsors, since without them, our channel surely would not exist. Thanks for listening. Kardia and Edgar here, and you're watching Mystcon Conspiracies. Have a creepy day.